So good morning, everybody, and it's a great honor to be here, to be invited for this. I've been working with OER for more than 5 years now, and it's just an amazing pleasure to be here. And thank you, Scott, and thank you, David. I emailed Scott out of the blue many times saying, what's happening now? What should I be doing now? So thank you for all that support. And so who is with me here? Who believes that public-funded resources should be public access, should be OER? Right? David? Come on. Oh my God, good morning, David. Okay, again, please, because I think David was sleeping already. Who believes that public... Thank you. So thank you very much. I owe you that, David. So I think we are in a world that information is an activity. Information is a life form, and information is a relation. And I think we really need to be inspired by this phrase in every moment we live nowadays, in business, in education, in culture, in technology, in science. And who said that is John Perry Barlow, who some of you may know. He's an American musician, and he's part of my board at EFF. I met him back in 2003. And he's an incredible guy. So for you that don't know, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, it's an organization that exists for more than 20 years. We are actually a public interest law firm, but also we work with policy. So yeah, I'm a lawyer in my background. And we really try to defend your rights in the digital age. So that's our mission, and I do that internationally, fighting really wacky treaties and trade agreements that many of us do not follow and come back to become laws in our countries, even when those countries have rejected those laws, like soap and PIPA in US. And that's happening internationally. So that's one of my missions there. Going back to the presentation, so three takeaways that I would like you to take from this presentation is that open systems and open networks can create modes of innovation and collaboration. And we saw many examples in the presentation of John, the keynote yesterday. New modes of innovation can be helped or hurt by institutional and government policies and design. And policies and design will be my two core focus here. Brazil and Brazilians and many countries around the world, we're going to mention just a few, and I'm happy to talk about others. Institutions are experimenting with openness, but it's just the beginning. And you are part of that. So it's really amazing for me to be here because 2-3 years ago I was in Open Ed, and you had a lot of ideas and brainstorm, and things were being born, like peer-to-peer university, and connections were like 10 years there, and David was there already. And now I see who is implementing it. So you are my heroes, you know, because we were doing the easy thing, just doing brainstorm around this. So it's a great honor to see this happening. And why this is important? This is Sir John Daniel, who's been working with UNESCO around these issues, and he points some data that accommodating these additional 105 million students around the world that are coming up to pressure the education system would take more than 4 major universities to open every week for the next 15 days. So we have a demand pressure. But the demand pressure is not just from the new students. It's also from the students sometimes we forget about. So in Brazil, in terms of disability, the students with disabilities, less than 30% go to our schools. And public education in Brazil, it's mandatory, it's obligatory. The family has to enroll kids in our public system. And these kids don't go because they feel frustrated, or the school is not prepared, or there are some other cultural barriers for that to happen. And I think we really need to look at all those groups and understand how OER can impact that. And we do have an environment, like environmentalism for OER. And I think the Cape Town Declaration, and more recently the OER UNESCO Declaration, bring that environmentalism, give us the core messages that put all of us together, and also identify us with some sister communities like free software and open government and so on. The three main keys from the Cape Town Declaration is open education policy. Governments, schools, boards, colleges, universities should make taxpayer-funded educational resources OER. So we are all on the same page on that. Open content license, OER should be freely shared through open license, which facilitate use, revision, translation, improvement, and sharing, and collaborative production. Educators and students can participate in creating, using, adapting, and improving. So again, we have the policy piece, we have the license piece, the design piece, and we have the people's piece. And all of you may know, but I just really want to be sure that we are all on the same page. There are 4 freedoms that OER enable, and that is very also a tradition that comes from the free software communities: reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute. If you don't have 4 freedoms, you are actually not really empowering or enabling, or you are not actually OER. There is a path to that, from less open to more open, and there are a lot of cultural barriers and institutional barriers and fear. It's very funny, like more than 10 years ago when I graduated from law school, IP was not taught in college, in many colleges in Brazil. So lawyers, to understand that a certain license could be used to open up content and not protect the content, was a rationale change in the way people see that. And imagine for the non-lawyers, right? Even more when you have even ads in the TV saying IP, 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 IP. And I'm not saying against IP, I'm just saying that there are many various ways to manage your intellectual property to make things open and legal. And we are here to discuss beyond content, right? And as I said in the beginning, we are talking about design, we are talking about people, we are talking about policy. In terms of design, I think there are 3 main issues here, and this is a very, very old slide that came from one of the Arash's presentation back when he was with Creative Commons. Where is Arash? Thank you, Arash. It's in terms of content, technology, and intellectual property. And this we talk a lot in Brazil, if you don't think about these 3 pieces, your OER may face some barriers later in terms of implementation and interoperability. So if you think that you want to create even collaboration between institutions, you really need to think on how you're going to make all this work. And when we develop policy around that, we also have to understand how this works. So we cannot just tackle the copyright issue, but you also need to tackle, will the government provide repositories? What are going to be the technical standards for those repositories? What is going to be the publishing standard for that repositories? The access, will be they federated? Will they communicate? How it's going to be the search? So all of this thinking in long term, we need to think in long term to be sure that people will be able to access those contents. And that's the message here, right? Interoperability, legal and technical are essential conditions for these new institutions that we are building. And this is not new, actually. This comes from the very core idea of the internet. So these are couple of the very early drawings of the internet. So you have the first one in '69 that evolved to that one. And then there was a choice to be made. Are we going to make the internet open or closed? And what that's going to mean? And we had 3 options, basically. We had a centralized, a decentralized, and a distributed option. And there was a conscious choice for the distributed infrastructure. And we are fighting for that choice every day nowadays, actually, in the debate of net neutrality and some other debates at the logical level. And that was what we merged. For that conscious choice of design, the internet, as we know nowadays, emerged. And many projects, like we saw yesterday, right? The free software and open source community, the free culture community, the free culture and educational community with Wikipedia around the world, the open science community that we saw yesterday, from do-yourself biology to big open institutional open science with GSK that we heard yesterday, the Human Genome Project, and all those projects that John went through yesterday. And it's really funny, this is not that new. Companies, they know when they need to collaborate to establish a standard in that market and then innovate and really be competitive. We had, for example, in alternative energy, companies deciding 10 years ago to not patent new knowledge, to be able to share and establish that industry would innovate from that, from a base. And so on. And of course in business, right? Innocentive coming from the pharmaceuticals has a crowdsourcing alternative to solve problems. And I was in a workshop with the guy that was responsible for Innocentive, and it would take 5 years and millions of dollars, I think $3 million to solve one problem. Nowadays take like a couple of months, 4 or 5 months, and $50,000 to solve a big pharmaceutical, like a pharmaceutical problem through the Innocentive platform. Threadless, Green Exchange, which is open license patenting for alternative energy, and many other open business models coming from many theories. Open innovation with Chesbrough at Berkeley, crowdsourcing, co-creation, open source software, and open business. So the idea here is that under the right circumstances, and here I see this as a design circumstance, groups are remarkably intelligent, and they are often smarter than the smartest people in them. You are really thinking about collaboration. So while I was at Harvard, I was in the cooperation group trying to understand how IP impacts in some innovation in some industries. They were alternative energy, biotech, and educational resources. So we did a broad study of the educational resource market in the US. And I think it is really that collaboration, all these projects that we see, they show the power and promise of women cooperation is transforming our business, government, and our society. And I had the honor to be working with Yochai Benkler there. And I think this picture always shows me very clear what that means. And the opposite of open is not close, actually, if you think about design. And also about design in policy terms. The opposite of open is actually broken. And attribution, this is John Wilbanks, who is my husband, but he also works in open science. He's come from our world also. And Creative Commons enables that in various formats, right? We have the machine readable, we have the human readable, and we have the legal code here. How many of you saw this chart already? So this is like a crack, like it really cracks your head when you try to understand legal interoperability of Creative Commons license. But this is really important when you are developing your OER projects and you say, okay, is my repository interoperable with OpenCourseware? Is my repository interoperable with Merlot? Can I deposit in connections? What does that mean? And we say that, for example, Creative Commons by one is one of the most free. Some people say, but share alike is the free, because I am enabling like a viral effect of freedom. But the problem is how many more conditions you impose down that value chain, less freedom you are generating in terms of legal interoperability. So we need to have that conscious. And that's an issue for us, because in Brazil, the license that have been chosen for the policies that I'm working with, and Deborah, who is here with me from Brazil, we are working with, is the CC BY non-commercial share alike. And it was really hard. I helped to write the laws, and it's really hard, the fear that academics have coming from the public sector saying that the ideas will be privatized. And it's really hard to break that. So we are in a path to openness. And it's important to make this design choice so you can change that later. And I think all this design recognizes that we actually learn differently. We need to be prepared to absorb this demand and the different students that come to our system. And what are the reasons, right? What are the reasons to adopt OER? If you are public funded, as we said, digital technology will surpass current teaching and learning structures somehow. Cost implications on constitution, rely on statutory license schemes, and only various restrictive use permitted. Like in Australia, they pay millions. Is anybody here from Australia? Like they pay millions. Like I'm working with some folks at the Ministry of Education, Delia Brown, who's actually has been many times to the Open Ed. She's one of the founders of Peer-to-Peer University. She showed me the numbers of what you guys pay statutory license, even with public domain materials. It's crazy. OER are easier to manage, not complex copying limits, no restrictions. You take the lawyer out of the equation. No restrictions in audience. And this is really important when you want to engage even more communities in the developing world. how you're going to engage the community and the parents to really be sure that the kid is still in the system. Allows teachers and students to modify, as you know. Education institutions should leverage taxpayer money, even more if they are public funded, and the numbers are really incredible in some countries on how much the government invests in education directly and through tax exemption. And quality can be improved. Cost of content supposedly is going to reduce the time, and David's bringing a lot of research on that. And open sharing will speed up the development of learning resources. And there is a funny joke coming from Brazil, like we printed some test books in geography. We change our books every 3 years, and they printed Paraguay twice in the South America map. And Pluto is still a planet and things like that. So if you have a OER, that could be fixed, and you didn't have to collect back all the test books, which had huge printing costs and distribution costs, more than printing costs actually, to fix. And the message here that we were talking is that implementation needs to be relevant nation by nation. So the policy we develop in Brazil that I'm going to show you a little bit may work or may not work to your country. You need to understand your publishing market. You need to understand how much money your government puts in educational resources. And you need to understand what are all the levels of decisions from the government to institutions, to projects, to schools. And you need to work differently in all these different levels, and you need to find your heroes. So that's why I said, you guys are heroes. You are like the chain to make this happen in your institutions. And if your institutions are adopting, the government will look at it. Because sometimes the government don't want to be the first mover. In some countries they do, thankfully in Brazil they did, but in some other countries they don't. And we need to build capacity inside the institutions. And in terms of heroes, for example, in the open access movement, we have Stuart Shibber, a professor that came from the librarian department in Harvard, and he took a sabbatical year, and he actually knocked every door of professors in Harvard, and that every door was actually what made possible the open access movement in Harvard as it is today. And luckily, we also have Peter Suber there at the Berkman Center for a couple of years now. And people, that's what I'm saying, people, we need to actually multiply this effect. Because you are here, and I'm happy, and this movement is also growing in Brazil and in many other countries, but we need to bring more people. We need to bring our colleagues, and we need to empower them, and we need to generate engagement. And sometimes this needs to be provoked. This needs, as design, needs to be a conscious choice. And who are our people? Everybody. Everybody. Even my mom goes to our workshops, you know. Like everybody. And my mom suffered through a lot of this because, like, she's a virologist. She works with HIV in AIDS in Brazil, and she didn't have access to many of the research, right? And she's in a top institution in Brazil, so that actually affects her. So she got it, you know. And so if we identify how every piece of this chain affects a person, how you make this tangible, is how you bring people, and is how you empower people, is how you engage people. And that has to be a parallel movement, right? You have to work with government, but you have to work with people, and those structures need to support each other in developing this policy. And you have to partner with legislators. You have to identify what are your heroes. You need to, like, put the names in and map them and see who has done what is the history of each other, with whom I can engage with. And luckily in Brazil, we could do that, and we could identify some folks that are really carrying our message. And these politicians are the ones that really care with the efficient use of national and state money coming from taxes. They really care with saving students' money, as Nicole was pointing to us. Good morning, Nicole. Was pointed to us yesterday. They are the ones that really care with access to education. In Brazil, more like even private schools like FGV and like top schools, the students do not have the money to buy materials. And there was a big problem with a big issue of copying test books, which we have in US too. We don't have the secondary marking for test books as we have the rental market. We don't have that in Brazil, unfortunately. So students do have to buy books every time, every year. And we end up Brazil ended up being the 301 specialist, which is the blacklist that US put other countries that consider infringing IP standards all over the world, right? For copies of textbooks. Understand the need to innovate in educational technology. And how much we are spending. And this slide I need to attribute to Cable from a previous presentation he did. And we are spending almost like average of 6% of GDP. And in Brazil now, the fight is to spend 10% of our GDP in education through the new National Plan of Education that's going to set the 10 next years of educational policy in Brazil. And the efficient use of these public funds to increase student success and access to quality is what matters. We need to understand how public funded is invested. And talking a little bit about Brazil. So Brazil is really bad in terms of intellectual property, in terms of our copyright. We come from a European tradition with exceptions and limitations, different from many of you that come from a fair use or fair dealing tradition, Anglo-Saxon tradition, and our exceptions and limitations are really restrictive. We were classified among the bottom 5 countries in terms of flexibilities, including for education. Even being like a very proactive country in the World Intellectual Property Organizations and other multilateral forums, our laws are just really restrictive. And we stop it and say, we need to reform this. And we are almost 8 years trying to reform our copyright law. And due to the change of head in the government, that was stopped for a year, unfortunately. But there was new change, and we hope that's going to move again. And as I was saying, we do have a lot of trouble in terms of access to books. The average of 30% of our books are out of print. The government provides tax exemptions that are huge. I'm going to show you some data. All the value chain of the publishing industry in Brazil is exempt. From the paper to the printing to the distribution, everything. 90% covered by state through scholarships. So for example, when you have a thesis completed, the cost that was paid for that through scholarships and support materials and everything, 90% was covered by the state, while the publishers put only 10% on packaging that and selling it as a book or a textbook. So there is a huge issue there in terms of identifying that actually the government is the biggest payer here. And who did this research was a department at the University of São Paulo. And they have incredible data. So in terms of exemption, and that's millions of dollars, has 2006, and we've been trying to get new data, and the government and the publishers associations, they are not giving us new data. But we're going to get that. So in 2006, there was more than $565 million of tax exemptions for the publishing industry in Brazil. And why that exists? Because by our constitution, the tax exception was given by our constitution to the publishing industry to be sure that students would have cheaper textbooks and would access those books. That was a specific justification for that article to be in our constitution. And who pays? I think I cover most of it, and the presentation will be available. But the conclusion is, yeah, we pay twice. We pay through taxes that are invested directly through salaries and scholarships and infrastructure, and then we pay again to buy those books. And that was one of the biggest reasons that really motivated us to start the OER Brazil project back in 2008. So the first thing we needed was actually try to understand all of this. Right, so we really mapped what was going on in Brazil, the economic cycle, the projects, how many projects were using open license or not, what was the mess, because Brazil is really actually famous for digital repositories for learning objects, but if you go deep on that, it's a mess in terms of legal and technical interoperability. And so it's all mapped, it's deposited in the SSRN, that the paper, if you guys want to look at that data. We needed materials. There was no information about OER. So we did like one-pagers in OER, really talking to the teacher. One-pagers really talking to the students, really talking to the different audiences. We built a website that brings what is OER, all the public policies so people can follow and participate on building these open policies. We mapped OER in Brazil and in the world, and we classify what is open, what is mixed, because it allows many licenses within the same repository, and and in Brazil and in the world. We have many documents and interviews and press and FAQ with 47 questions and answers from what it is to what are the business models, why I care. It was a huge effort to really bring information and awareness raising on OER in Brazil. And we finally have people. Like, I was building this presentation and I said, wow, this slide has changed so much over the years, you know, like one of the first pictures was this down here, right? Like, was a group of people back in 2008, and some of you were there in Brazil. So Robert was there, right? Arash was there. A couple of people were there in that conference, and from that conference, a community started growing. So for the first time, we started developing our OER community there all together, and that was it's very amazing. Like, now we have other heroes that are really taking the work and moving ahead and working with sister communities. And we really wanted to engage the teachers. So I don't know if you can see there is like a little basket with apple. We went to the Conference of National Education, which was discussing the plan of national education, and we distributed like 1,000 apples. And we talked to almost 2,000 professors, and I know that because we handed material and we had account of that. And the apple was an idea to bring people to say, look, if I give you an apple, I lose that apple. But if I give you an idea, if we share an idea, we both have that idea now. And that was really like I started a conversation to raise awareness around those teachers that were there fighting for better conditions and better salary. And they said, wow, I want to leave the shadow of piracy. Right? Because they are bombarded every day that they are pirates by the American Chamber of Commerce and other international IP enforcements that occur in developing countries. And that's the message. And they say, I don't want to be a pirate. How do I do this? So it was a really good engagement there. And some of our hero politicians, so this here, Alexandre Schneider, he was the secretary of São Paulo City. He was the one that did with us the decree that declared that every pedagogical and textbook and complementary material from the city of São Paulo, which is the richest in São Paulo, in Brazil, would be open license. So they are online and they are open license. Sometimes they said, if I had understood exactly what you guys were asking me, I probably would not have done the decree. I said, now it's done. Don't go back. But now he's engaged, right? Now that's part of his political platform, and that's what we want. He is a guy that really want to bring technology and good curriculum for the class. Brazil spends millions bringing tablets and computers and laptops to school. We have the smart blackboards. But what happened? There is no curriculum and there is no electricity in some schools. So the blackboard is, right? It's there as a god or something. So we need to break that. And these politicians are helping. Like Hal Plotkin's here, we took him a couple of times to Brazil. He also had helped us inspire some politicians there. And that's in UNESCO is Angelo Vagnoni, who is the House of Representatives. That's the reporter for the federal bill. And we took him to Paris last June, and that, I think, seeing that is a worldwide movement really motivated him to engage and help new fronts in Brazil. So you need to engage those politicians. And on the top corner, we have a meeting with Deborah, that is here too, and Simão Pedro, and the Secretary of State of São Paulo, who has billions investing in education. We're going to have a 5 billion investment in technology and education in the next 4 or 5 years. In São Paulo. And we are there discussing the state bill that was approved already by all the legislative committees. It's up to the final vote and final signature. So send good energies down there. And again, that's another slide that really makes me really emotional and honored. A couple of years ago, you just had 2 or 3 logos there, and now we have all these projects emerging. With indigenous communities, with communities from like riversides and things like that. And we also produced a book that's open license and free, and soon it's going to be in Spanish and English, and it's available online. So this was how we also engage community and experts and academia to say, tell us your story about OER. So it's here if you guys want to see. It's in Portuguese, this version. And public policy. So as I say, just going a little faster, because I already mentioned, in the National Plan of Education, we were able to insert 2 mandates for OER at the K-12 level. The plan was a very participatory project. Brazil is in a very interesting, amazing moment in terms of participatory democracy and how people are actually working with the government to build laws. And that's what I say, you need people, and you need to be smart on how you engage people building this. We have in Utah crowdsourcing legislation being built. We have some initiatives from the Obama government and so on. So this is possible. The platforms are there. The platforms for people to comment article by article are there. So behind door lobby is still necessary, but it's not just the only route anymore. And that was why, like, we more than 3,000 changes in a plan, and we were able to include 2 articles on OER. The OER Brazilian federal bill that says that things paid by public money needs to be public license, also deals with repositories and so on. And then now we have a task force to really push this bill along the chain. And this is Paulo Teixeira, which is the author of the bill with whom we all worked with. And he said, like, for many years, I worked with the issue of access to knowledge. He worked with urbanism. He worked with access to medicine. And he works with access to technology. He gets it, how it's important. And he gets how the internet can change people's lives. And our government, he recognized, he saw the numbers, he almost fell out of his chair, right? In terms of the numbers that the University of São Paulo folks brought. It's huge. So he said, we need to do something here. In the state of São Paulo, again, we have the bill, and I'm happy to provide all the language that you guys have, the OER bill, the federal one, we have our English version. And that bill is going to a portal in Brazil that's called e-democracy, which is this participatory moment where everybody can actually suggest changes and improve the legislation. So let's see what's going to happen. Until now, we didn't have any strong pushback from the publishers. And for you to see, for example, the copyright law that I said is under reform for some time, received almost 8,000 suggestions. So the community is really participating. And the Marco Civil da Internet, which is our bill that's going to regulate internet in Brazil to have a free internet, like it's a positive bill that came reacting to some criminalization of activities in internet, also was highly participatory. Like it's an example worldwide on what happened. So people really got engaged. People want to get engaged in making policy. And some examples in the US. I'm going to pass that. And in open access, like you have people also pushing for policies. So we are the people who, do you guys know the system, the online petition that if you get over 25,000 signatures, the White House is kind of obliged to consider that policy. So the open access community did do that, and they had more than 25,000 signatures, and they are talking with the White House about a wide, broad policy in open access in the United States. And for the first time in history in the United States, you guys have a great chance to really implement OER through the curriculum setting process and so on. And really move OER in the mainstream, and you are the proof. Like OER is moving in the mainstream here. So anyways, to start wrapping up the presentation. So I think we all agree that OER do support personalization, right? Who agree with that? Okay, that's a process, right? Promote education collaboration. Who are you feel like engaged and collaborating with your students? How difficult is that, right? Providing a pathway to support educational development. This is really important in developing countries because when you bring technology, you really need to bring a curriculum to train the teachers and to really support the teacher has a core center of this ecosystem. And it does support any time, any place learning models, and this is really important for the community with disabilities. So you have the Department of Labor, you have the Washington State policy. and you have the Utah policy. Now you have the BC policy that was just announced while we are here. So I'm just bringing this. I'm passing fast because you guys know about this. They are happening everywhere. They happen in South Africa. The government adopted the Siavula books. They are happening in India. They are happening in South Africa. Europe has a consultation on open education right now. So if you guys want to work with Europe at all, is the chance to really push that in the European government. Cristobal, who is here from the Oxford Internet Institute, is working on that. And it's a really good moment to collaborate. And why that's necessary? I don't know if you guys know, I don't know if you buy materials in your school. Have you read the contracts that come with the books that you buy? Like you can do anything. You cannot index, you cannot crawl, you cannot do anything. And there is another thing. With the move from analog to digital, have you ever read the contracts coming to public libraries on the e-books? You can lend that e-book just to one people at a time for 21 times in US. After the 21, it expires. You lose the book. It's not in your library anymore. This is crazy, people. Okay, who say this is crazy? My God. Seriously, like, I get goosebumps. Like, it's a crazy reality. If we don't understand what's coming from the market and we don't play with these policies, our libraries will be empty. They are, like, the books are, we already have any, like, well, at least the Google decision recently was good, you know, and so maybe we have some hope. But we cannot do e-lending. We cannot do cross-librarian exchange of these digital books. Oh my God! Seriously. And now we are discussing the World International Property Organization in WIPO in Geneva, which a lot of people feel it's very distant, but for the first time has a proactive agenda, a treaty for acceptance and limitations for librarians. The International Associations of Librarians are there. We are also discussing a treaty for acceptance and limitations for the blind. The blind unions are there. They kept really hard the American blind unions out of it, not the unions, but the American government, which is part of the dark force internationally in this area, actually. The dark side of the force. And it's really sad because you guys have amazing fair use, amazing fair dealing, but you don't export that. You just export these enforcement rules. I'm sorry. If you read if you read ACTA, if you read CPP, which is the treaty being negotiated in the Pacific region, it's really frustrating. And that's what you see in the digital. You see the end of the first sale doctrine. You see the end of e-lending. You cannot donate your books. So that culture I have, okay, I have a book. I bought a book. I think I have it. And I'm going to donate to my library. Or I'm going to give to a friend. You can't do that. So what are we going to do about it, right? These are broken business models that we need to partner with the publishers to help them figure out something that's better for education and for consumers. And I think it's a partnership, okay? And OER has impact. Many of us are researching the OER impact. And for example, in open access, they already have numbers. So in terms of how motivated you are to adopt OER, when you talk to teachers, when you talk to your heroes that are people that will make the chain move, you can say, look, you may not make a lot of money with it, which you would not make in the publishing industry, right? You all know the long tail doctrine probably, right? But it does generate recognition. It does generate adoption, connections. OpenStax and Dave, all these guys are providing really good numbers. Flatword and all those guys are providing really good numbers. And now I ask your help, actually. So Creative Commons has put an open policy registry together where you can follow all these policies that are being built around the world. And the great news also is that Creative Commons, with many of us are founding the Open Policy Institute to really help people around the world to really work together on finding good language, on understanding what research needs to be done, on really partner and working together to move this and raise awareness. You know, a lot of people, when I say you can get your book just 24 times, like, nobody knows that. Nobody reads the contracts, just us boring lawyers. Well, not even I read all the contracts. Anyway, survey on government, like, yeah. Okay, iPhone, yes, I agree, download the app. Anyway, survey on government on open educational resources, OER policy. So UNESCO is interested in that. They are mapping. You just have to be a little careful here because they were based on survey coming from governments, and many governments said, all we have is open. And when you look, it's actually not. So look with a little careful here. And conclusions. So if you care about the emergency of knowledge federation systems and that allow broader access to knowledge, you may have to have some kind of intervention and not wait for just organic. So all of you, I really ask your help, all of you, or some of you, try to convince the person on your side. Okay, look to your side, Deborah. Convince him. You're already convinced, right? He's been to Brazil, so yeah, he knows us. So anyway, so let's try to move this chain. If you don't have a year sabbatical, just knock on the door of your colleague on the room by your side. That is the chain. Sometimes you find heroes that will just carry the work, and you don't need to do it. And this means inclusion, that means cooperation. Wide dissemination of education contributes to more inclusive and cohesive societies, and we need that. Fosters equal opportunities and innovation in line with priorities of a renewed social agenda, and I would say social contract, focus on the knowledge society. In this sense, you cut that part. And that is now really part of the Brazilian international agenda. So I was really happy when we engaged the foreign affairs ministers in our discussions with UNESCO, and they really bought that. They are really making official positions that OER will be part of the Brazilian international policy in IP and access to knowledge. And I think that should be the duty of all the governments, to be sure that we are not being hypocrites. Many governments actually signed recently the Open Government Partnership. And it's not just about, or should not just be about, open information to, access to information, to governmental information. It should be about understanding where the money goes and having the possibility to interfere there. US, Brazil, and some of those countries there that I list are founding partners of the Open Government Partnership. It's about transparency, it's about inclusion, it's about how technology can enable democracy right now. And the commitment is to action. And there are many more countries already in this partnership. So, as I said in the beginning, I have 3 takeaways for you. Open systems and open networks can create modes of innovation and collaboration. New modes of innovation can be helped or hurt by institutional and government policies and design. Brazil and Brazilian institutions and countries all over the world are experimenting with this. And it just takes all of some of us. And we are all of some of us. And that's what I ask you. I ask your help to move that chain forward. So thank you so much.
So, Carol, you're one of the greatest advocates in the world for working with policymakers to help them understand why open policy is important and to help them craft an open policy that's possible within the political environment that they exist. Could you talk a little bit about, for those of us who don't have as much experience as you do in this, how do you go about that? How do you find the right politicians? How do you look for the opportunities? How do you negotiate with them to get them to understand that this is actually in their best interest and in the best interest of the country or the province that they're in?
Sure. So I think as I said, I think we are in an amazing moment to find those guys. Many countries are taking technology to the classroom. And you have an opportunity there. You have a window of opportunity to work with them. And probably some of you do work in Brazil. Who have partnerships here in Brazil? I found some of you, maybe people already left, but they are looking for help. And the politicians are looking for help. they are looking for help from the World Bank and many other organizations, but they are also looking for help from institutions. So you find them because they are looking for help. That's one step. The other step is to identify them, who are the ones that supported sister communities. So who are the champions in free software, which is, how do I say in English, like above a party discussion, right? These discussions need to be like above party disputes, right? In US, SOAP and PIPA, they were defeated by both Republicans and Democrats. Actually, a Republican started that. Wyden and Issa and other representatives and senators, they understood that this is something above. So if you identify who are the champions already close to the technology discussion, to debate, to sister communities, and that, or sometimes even with the entrepreneurship community. Like, we need to foster entrepreneurship here. We have new business models emerging all over the world. Lacani from Harvard Business School has mapped how much money the free software community has been doing. Even IBM is not just like a grassroots entrepreneurship thing. So who are your usual suspects? So that's the first level, right? And then the second level, you're going to have to map through their allies, because sometimes it's exchange. And then you need to understand that. So.
You and some others in the last few days keep using the term intellectual property. In Canada and in the United States, there are court decisions stating that copyright material is not property. And yet we continue to use these terms. And it seems to me it's an Orwellian term, that it's something, we should use the terms of what it is. It's a privileged monopoly.
Yeah. You are friends with Richard Stallman, right?
And intellectual, it's not property. And most of the copyrighted material is not particularly intellectual. The educational stuff is, and if I go, wada bing bang, woo wah wee, this is not intellectual. But I am releasing it on a Creative Commons license. 0, do not attribute me. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome, thank you. Yeah, that's our old debate, right? Are we gonna, that was the name adopted forever. And you're right, actually before, in some older laws with Statute of Anne, that was the first copyright bill in the world, like in England in 70s, the word was monopoly. So that has changed around with time, and it really brought together the discussions around creativity to the discussions around trade. And that brought a lot of difficulties in how we see ideas being shared and how we see innovation in the space and how we actually measure all of this. So I agree with you. There are a lot of problems using this word. It's just the way we communicate. But yeah, the discussion is there. You're right.